All right, so hi everyone. This is the CKEditor 5 Drupal integration demo on March 11, 2021. So this is the state of the contributed project, and we're going to discuss the next steps.
All right, well, let's get started. Hi everyone, my name is Peter Weber. I work on the Drupal acceleration team at Acquia, and I've been helping lead this project a bit. I'm one of the maintainers of the CKEditor 5 module on Drupal core. I'll just share my screen. Let me know if you can see that. This is just the project page for CKEditor 5. We had previously been working on a core merge request, but now we realized that because of the scope of the work and because of the ease of being able to open separate issues here, it makes a lot more sense to just work in a contrib project. The plan is to eventually get this into core, but we want to do all the development here in contrib and solve all the problems that we can in this place. So if you have any issues you want to open or any issues you want to review or anything to discuss, this is the place to go. So I'll just start with a brief demo of the current state of CKEditor 5 module. In Drupal core, there's the concept of editors and filter formats. And so you've always been able to add a different WYSIWYG and swap it out. CKEditor has been in Drupal 8 since 8.0, but to add CKEditor 5 to core, we're planning on using the same framework. So using the editor framework that works with quick edit, that works with the filter formats. And so when you're in a text format like basic HTML, with the old CKEditor, we have this toolbar UI that lets you select buttons. And this does a lot behind the scenes. It sort of enables plugins and changes some configuration when you move these toolbar buttons around. With CKEditor 5, it works very similarly. So we've added a new toolbar UI. This is just adding all of the available buttons. And I'll talk a bit more about plugins later, but for now, you're able to select a button and drag it into the toolbar. And there's also dividers as well to match the old UI. This is one of the key requirements here is accessibility. And so I'll just demo this real briefly. If I enable VoiceOver on my Mac, when I tab, and it's going to yell at me. But you can see I don't know if you can hear the audio, but you'll be able to see I'm going to turn that off as well because it's yelling into my ears. But you can see that we've added the ARIA announcements for all of these different keys. You can also use keyboard commands. So if you tab into it by tapping the down arrow, you can actually add it directly to the toolbar. A key requirement here as well is connecting with the existing filter system. So you can see that if we enable image uploads, for example, but don't add the image upload button, when I save, I should get a validation error. And so you can see that image upload requires the image upload toolbar button. And then this is also red as well. And so I'll add a couple more things here. Add a divider. You notice another message that we gave was the current CKEditor 5 build requires the following elements and attributes. So every plugin in Drupal that we create has the opportunity to declare elements that the CKEditor 5 plugin supports. And that way this is still an open issue and we still want to improve this, but the basic idea is that we want to let CKEditor control which elements are supported, because those plugins, if you add a CKEditor plugin like the bold plugin, for example, it enables that support for the strong tag or the image tag, for example, or headings, things like that. And so by adding these CKEditor 5 plugins, you're supporting markup, and we want to put that in one place so that rather than letting a Drupal user go down here and add arbitrary elements here, this should be exactly what CKEditor 5 supports. And so now when I save that, it should pass the validation. I'll just jump into a content page. And so you can see that now we have the same toolbar config. We have the bold, italic, the little divider, and the image, and the insert Drupal media button as well. So of course, all the usual WYSIWYG things work, like making things bold and italic. We can also insert an image. This uses just a browser, so you can click on an image and upload it right away. One nice thing in the CKEditor UI is this sort of toolbar, or sorry, tooltip like UI where you can click directly on an element and change its options. So like in this case, you can add alt text right directly onto the image. So before in Drupal with CKEditor 4, you would use a dialog that would pop up. And I'll just save that briefly so you can see the content. And so we get an image in there. One thing I mentioned before was just sort of working with Drupal, and I talked a bit about plugins, but something that's important for Drupal is the data attributes. And so when you upload a new file entity to Drupal, it's going to get a new entity ID, and that needs to get translated back both into CKEditor and then saved into the content. So getting this data entity UUID here and data entity type are both important features for Drupal, and one reason why the plugins are bundled the way they are. And then just I'll demo real briefly the media upload as well. So the media library is part of Drupal core. It's not in the standard profile yet, and there's a lot of push to get that in there. So for now, we wouldn't leave this enabled by default, but when media and media library are both enabled, you'll be able to add this toolbar button. And this lets you open up a Drupal dialog with a browse for all of the existing media. This is the Umami install, so it has a lot of content by default. And so you can see that we've now added an image. CKEditor 5 lets us create sort of a raw element. And so even though it is fairly strict about which elements it allows, by creating this raw element, we can inject whatever we need to in here. And so this is actually the result of a fetch from a Drupal media preview URL. But then it's wrapped in this CKEditor 5 widget. And so you get this nice UI with a way of like adding a line right above it really easily. So some of the things I know in the past, whenever you've tried to click on a WYSIWYG, you end up with maybe a place where there's no room to type. And so this kind of UI makes just a small quality of life improvement that lets you add some UI even to a very custom element like this media embed. What actually gets saved in Drupal is a single media element, a Drupal media element. But then when the page is rendered, you get the entire like article markup with the full image source and everything. Does anyone have any questions so far, or would you like me to talk a bit more about the plugin structure and some of the code? Okay. Well, let me talk a bit more about the code then. Can everyone hear me, by the way? I'm not seeing my chats.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so let me talk a bit more about the plugin structure. I mentioned briefly with images how we have image, the image caption, and in Drupal's case, a small plugin that adds that feature for the data attributes. And so if you think about how CKEditor 5 works, there's actually like a number of plugins. And so in this online builder, you can select like image and image caption all separately, and image toolbar, for example. And those are all things that you would add as individual pieces. But in Drupal, I thought it made more sense to just sort of bundle things. And so let me just jump over to the CKEditor 5 image. So this is a YAML definition, and this describes the entire plugin. So this is the CKEditor 5 image. It points to a library in Drupal, and the library is something that Drupal can add JavaScript and CSS. The plugins are actually, these are referring to well, they're classes that are added to the CKEditor 5 global object using the DLL build. Basically, when you build CKEditor 5, you can either do it with imports and sort of writing JavaScript and then running a build command to build an entire compiled editor with all of your config already baked in. But what the CKEditor team did was added a way of using Webpack DLLs where the entire project is actually compiled into many separate files. But when you load all of those on the same page, they get bundled into one big global, and then you can access them and load whichever ones you want at runtime. So it's really convenient, and it's been a huge lifesaver for this project, because it means that every single plugin, every single contributed module can add its own JavaScript, and it'll fit in with the existing build without having to run any Webpack commands or anything as a Drupal developer. So the plugins here are defined in config. This is the actual name of the CKEditor 5 plugin, and you can see we've chosen image toolbar, and then our Drupal image. And so this altogether is the configuration for us for the Drupal feature. The toolbar items are what the module provides. And then elements and attributes, this is written in the same sort of syntax that the HTML filter expects. And so if you add another element that supports image with a different tag, that'll get merged together. And so you'll have support for the image tag plus your custom modules, let's say like some other data attribute or some other attribute that isn't here that you add. So the idea of this config was to make it as simple as possible. And I'll show a demo of that in just a second, but there are going to be times when this is not enough and that static config is not sufficient. So all of these Drupal plugins, this YAML is actually the same as an annotation. So if you're familiar with Drupal plugins, when you write a plugin at the top of the PHP class, you can write a special type of comment, which is a plugin annotation. And these are discovered by the plugin manager and loaded. And then this, although it looks like a PHP comment, is actually data that's parsed and again corresponds exactly to the YAML. So you can write this in YAML only and not ever create a PHP class. Or if you prefer, you can write a PHP class without an annotation and put your annotation in YAML, or you can not write YAML at all and write just a PHP class, depending on what your needs are and what your comfort is with each of these languages. The PHP classes have a few interfaces that they can extend. And so we try to keep things split apart so that if it needs to be aware of what's going on the filter format page, which I started showing, then we would have a contextual interface. And this lets you do things like validate the image upload settings. This is where we can show an alert for, like I require this toolbar item if this filter box is checked. And so before in CKEditor 5 or CKEditor 4, some of this was done with form alters. It was put in .module files. And so one of the goals here was to get everything inside a plugin file so that the module developer can write a single file that does everything from validating the filter settings to actually providing the config from the plugin itself. So one thing is this dynamic plugin config. In this case, we'd want to get something directly from Drupal, like this upload URL. So we need to actually get this route from a Drupal route, set parameters, create a generated URL. And so this here will be merged with the annotations at the top. And so we'll get our normal things that we know about, like the plugins, the toolbar items, but then we'll merge in some dynamic config as well. Let's see. And so far we just have a few of these, like the media library both have some validation and some dynamic values. But in general, if you're writing just a plain CKEditor 5 plugin, you can probably get away with just having just a single YAML file. So I'm going to show, this is an example of a plugin that I made just to show off how this can work. I created a CKEditor 5 plugin called Infobox that just provides a pretty simple little bit of markup and some classes. And I compiled that file and put it in here. So this is a minified JavaScript file. And this was a CKEditor 5 plugin that I just used the DLL builds to create this JavaScript artifact. I added a little bit of CSS. Admin.css is meant for the toolbar so that I can make it, I can style that button. And then the Infobox CSS is its actual CSS. Every Drupal module will have a .info file. This is completely standard. It lets you declare your dependencies and all of your basic information. Libraries is another Drupal specific file that lets you declare where your assets live. So you can see that I've just pointed this to my GitHub repo, just put in some license info, the location of the JavaScript in this module, the location of the CSS in this module, and its dependencies on the CKEditor 5 module. Then the admin is just simply a CSS file. So with these two libraries, I have a way for my module to point to its resources. And then I can create a YAML file that contains all the config for my CKEditor 5 plugin. So it lists the plugins that it requires, it lists the toolbar items that it provides, and then the plugin config that you can edit here in YAML, and then as well as the elements that it includes as well. So let me just, to prove that this does work, and then just with 3 YAML files and a JavaScript file, you can get a working plugin. Just enable that. So I've enabled info box. Now, if I go back to my text formats and editor screen, if I go to configure, I should see a new icon. So I have an info box toolbar item, which I can drag down wherever I want. I'll put one more divider in. So now this button is generated by that admin CSS. This look, it's just a static. It doesn't actually drop down. When I save, I'm going to get a validation warning because I haven't added the new elements that this plugin supports or requires. And now when I go back to edit this page, I should have an option to create an info box. And so if I make a little space for it, if I go down, I can add a notice, a warning, or an error. And you can see these are loaded from the YAML directly. So this corresponds directly to the config that I added in YAML. So if I add a notice, I'll add a notice, and then I'll add, I'll just make an error as well. And what I did here was added a little bit of styling so that there's a data attribute. You can see there's a data label notice. I'm just using CSS to make that appear in the corner. So forgive the poor styling, but it's just to illustrate a point. So I've added these 2 info boxes here. And then when I click save, you'll notice that this markup can be configured separately in the CKEditor plugin. So that data attribute of label should be gone, but you'll still see that I have my styled box. So one thing I think is pretty exciting about CKEditor 5 is that although you can't edit the HTML source directly, as a developer and a designer, you could write a JavaScript plugin that would let you create any arbitrary markup. So you can see here's a section. It's got specific class names like notice, info box description, and it's something that you could create for your content editors that when they're able to pick from certain options, you can give them toolbars that are relevant to the content that they're trying to create. And then when they add buttons, sorry, when they click a button, they can get a full thing of markup with editable areas and regions, and there's no chance that the content editor can, miss a closing tag or screw up or eventually add a lot of their own styling that would be completely wrong and wouldn't match the design at all. Like not like this at all, which is beautiful. But then just one thing I wanted to show as well is just to back up that these are that this is really configurable. I'll just add one more here, and I'll call it demo. And now in here, I'm just going to add a demo box. So if I type demo, I can add in my demo text. And I cheated a little bit because I already wrote the CSS for that. But I think that the direction we're going with this was to make contrib very easy. And so as a JavaScript developer, if you can write your plugin for CKEditor 5, the configuration to actually make it work in Drupal should be as minimal as possible. And so we're definitely working on trying to improve this, and we welcome any sort of feedback for improvements we can make, and for especially for developer experience at this point, because we want to really welcome the contrib community and make them excited about adding CKEditor 5 plugins, and find that process should be straightforward to write them, and to create lots of little components like this, and helpful things that can add unique markup that is configurable and easy for developers to jump into.
So one thing that the CKEditor 4 integration does is that it auto generates the allowed HTML tags. And now you are kind of reporting it as an error and then expect the user to copy it over. Do you plan to automate that in the future?
Yeah, there's an open issue for that rather than showing a validation error. The validation error was copied from the media module, and so that's how it works currently. If you enable the media library button, but you don't have the embed media filter selected, for example, then it'll give you a validation warning like that. This is, if I think, yeah, that's certainly a question as to whether that's a better thing to do, to actually pre-fill this value and then maybe disable this field, or disallow the HTML filter entirely if you're using CKEditor 5. I think there's a few possibilities for how we can handle
that. Okay. And the other thing I think that you didn't demo is that it also works with in-place editing.
Yes, exactly. If you click on Quick Edit here, then you'll get the little the widget here. And you can click here and add. You can just make some text bold and maybe add an image. So that was just quickly running through Quick Edit, but it loads in that toolbar, and then you can any sort of text area that you click in will allow you to edit directly on the page.
So what else would you need from CKEditor?
I think from the module, or you mean what's left on the roadmap, or what
from the editor? Yeah. What kind of integration points do you still need from the CKEditor side?
We still need to finish adding some of the features like the captioning and the alignment. And so this needs to work with both media elements and images. And so we need to write a custom plugin there. So figuring out how that would work, what the best way is to do that, and whether we should modify an existing plugin or add on to it like the way I did with the image data attributes. So there's a lot of questions about the plugins we're building, and getting within our Drupal community. I don't think there's a ton of expertise on CKEditor 5 plugins, or at least not on my side at least. And so getting reviews on those and making sure that we're doing the right things and that this all makes sense. I think getting validation on the work we've done so far would be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's been really amazing. I mean, I didn't expect to see that much, especially that the drag and drop of the toolbar is already completed, and a lot of other things. We're happy to help. I know we are planning to set up that call to start collaborating better on this, and it's been we couldn't start for a month, I guess, but yeah, I mean, let's maybe just start and see how we can help. I'm also curious what we could do on our side. I thought we, for instance, would have to work on this on exposing our online builder, the front end of that online builder, for you to reuse. It's nice that we don't have to do that. That's a bit less work for us. But yeah, if there are any other things, we can try to help with that. Yeah, so let's maybe just set up a call and see what we can help with.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the online builder, the reason that we went this direction was because of mainly because of accessibility and keyboard support. We wanted to build something that matched the previous toolbar UI features pretty well. One thing it isn't doing that we identified as something that could be an improvement is getting the SVG icons automatically. And I think you posted some guidance for that a while back that we could maybe get it from from the editor itself, and instead of manually loading the SVG files. So
yeah, that should be possible if you have the instance of the editor possible to start on that page. Then you could do that. That's the way I think our online builder works, that we instantiate the buttons in the background and just reuse that DOM fragments. One thing I wanted to ask is, if I noticed correctly, you reuse our image plugin and then build on top of it.
Yes.
How did it work?
The Drupal image plugin only adds the data attributes. So it only adds the data entity UUID and data entity type attributes to an image. And it worked pretty well. I'm not sure if that was the correct approach. And as I mentioned with the other attributes like captioning in Drupal, rather than having a caption as a separate markup, they added as a data attribute to the image itself. And then the media element is also a custom element, Drupal media, and it would also need a data caption. And so it didn't seem as though the current image caption plugin would work for us. And so we may need to either rebuild it or do something custom. I'm not sure.
I mean, for the editing part, unless two things. First of all, we are actually right now rebuilding the image feature. So that's something that worried me a bit, that we may introduce some breaking changes that could affect your integration, but hopefully not. We are trying to more add to what we have right now. But there were some breaking changes needed because we are working right now on support for inline images. And so far, as you may know, we only have block images, but for backwards compatibility, we also need to support inline images. And we decided to review how both features work together. So inline images are like a separate feature to block images, but integrating both in a way that they work well together required some changes. But I think nothing critical was removed, especially in the base image feature. So, and as for the image caption, if you are okay with how the structure of this work looks inside the editor, that there is maybe that, yeah, that can be, even that can be overridden. But so what I'm trying to say is that I'm quite sure you can reuse bits of the image caption feature, but we are actually also simplifying this right now because what you can see right now in CKEditor 5 is that the image caption appears when you focus the image, and we figured out that this wasn't the right path. It creates some blinking, especially if you have a long content, floated images, then it creates a lot of mess. So there will be a separate button to show or hide the image caption. And that actually simplifies the implementation a lot. So the image feature gets simpler. So yeah, we can see together if there's actually a reason to reuse that, or it's just easier to copy some small bits of it.
Okay, yeah, that would be really helpful, because when I was working on this Infobox plugin, for example, I noticed that there's some libraries that are really helpful, like the list view and things like that for the drop-down UI. And so any sort of guidance you have on the best things to use versus the wrong things to copy from would be really helpful.
Sure.
One thing while we're talking about images, with the data attributes in Drupal, those come from the response. So after uploading an image to Drupal, we respond with the data attributes, because those are created on the server. And there isn't currently a way that's easy in CKEditor to save those data attributes directly from the response. And so we did a little bit of a workaround there, but there is an open GitHub issue to talk about that. And I don't know if you have, there's an open GitHub issue for CKEditor 5 to add the option to allow attributes on an image after you finish uploading it.
I'm not aware of this ticket. You can
Okay.
Send me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I didn't know if that was at all on your roadmap for the changes you're making to the images.
No, that wasn't on the roadmap, but we can check.
Okay, thank you.
So there was also the question of moving from CKEditor 4 to 5. I think the full HTML support was part of that area.
Yeah, with I think I don't know if we want to talk about that, but the arbitrary HTML or the full HTML support is something that we're still thinking about in Drupal as well. That even when you switch, like when I showed that at the beginning, switching from CKEditor 4 to 5, even there we'd want to show maybe a warning that there could be potentially data loss if you switch between the editors. And so we want to figure out. I think a while back we talked about having some sort of alert or some kind of notice in CKEditor when you enabled CKEditor 5 and it detected that there was HTML it couldn't parse or something like that, that we could show some kind of warning to a user.
Yeah, I've been thinking on this on our side. We had some discussions because there's no like an easy way to discover whether something was lost, and it's hard to define what's that something. Because for instance, Skater always also normalize the HTML that it gets that's being loaded. That we normalize spaces, we get rid of, trim them, we parse attributes, parse styles, and so on and so on. So there is some potential, let's say, data loss of if the incoming data was incorrect or wasn't actually generated by CKEditor 5 itself and was a bit formatted differently when there was some manually added content. Then on this step we can lose some bits. Also, this means that even if everything was survived, let's say, then still, since the HTML was reformatted a bit, we cannot just like compare as strings and see, okay, if you load the data into the editor, then get it back, and we compare the input and the output, and we see it's different, but we don't know whether it was the normalization or whether something was lost. So such simple methods wouldn't work. Then we can go deeper and try to have something built into our conversion mechanism. And there are we could think about some heuristics to discover that some bits were not converted to the model. So we could then try to guess whether they were lost or not, but it's not that simple as well, because we have a lot of like fallbacks for content that that couldn't be converted by, let's say that the legitimate features, like let's say paragraphs, headings, images, and so on. So it couldn't be converted by those features, but since we wanted to maintain as much as possible, we try to, for instance, at least convert the text nodes and wrap them in paragraphs. And even if it cannot convert sections and divs and something, then we wrap that content into paragraphs and keep it as that. So we lost the elements themselves, but we kept the text nodes, and it's just hard to understand how much was actually lost, and whether this was a substantial thing, important thing or not. And this is a bit hard. So we couldn't have like a definite answer. We could definitely have some like a tip that, okay, it seems that something was lost. You probably should check whether it's true or not. So that's definitely doable. That's definitely doable. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure how far we can push it in this direction.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think any warning would be helpful, but yeah, especially preserving. I don't know if that would help. Gabor, do you think that just having even if you lose the markup, as long as you keep the content, that seems like a big win.
Yeah, definitely better. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that this is an area where we'll need to discuss more. We'll figure it out.
I mean, yeah, I would have to understand a bit more what's what are the possible options, and what are your thoughts about those possible options? Because perhaps some option that I would consider just, I don't know, useless for some reason, perhaps it would work for you. So maybe that will also need some thorough analysis and discussion.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think we have an open issue on it, and we'll keep talking there, and I'll send you that link too, so that we can get some more discussion around that, because it's something that we're working on ongoing.
And my next question is, what else needs to be done for this to get into core?
So we have a roadmap issue that Laurie and I created, and so it's based off of the original core issue. So it may need some work because we've added a few notes to it, but it could definitely use some more eyes on it and deciding if it's thorough enough. But the main goal is to get this module stable, get agreement on how the plugin system works. I think what I demoed today was not final by any means. It's just sort of aspirational. We want to make sure that it's straightforward for JavaScript plugin developers to use the Drupal plugin system. It's tough because everything is called plugin. It's hard to talk about, but the idea is for this to be very friendly to contrib and to sort of foster this ecosystem and make it so that all of the CKEditor 5 plugins can be easily added to Drupal. And so once we have that more certain and have all of the questions and problems figured out, I think we'll be in a much better place. We want to add a lot more test coverage too. There's some very rudimentary test coverage around image upload and validation, and around just enabling a contrib module and things like that. But we need a lot more specifically JavaScript tests and more functional tests too. I think, yeah, just getting this more stable and making sure that it's all in a final enough place that people can start building contrib modules against it without worrying that it's going to change drastically. Laurie, did you want to add anything to that, or?
Nope, I think that covers it pretty much.
So there's one more question in chat about CKEditor support for web components and what it would take to enable that in Drupal.
So that's something I'm not too sure about. I think that it's possible. I would like to if you have some suggestions on building a demo, I'd be glad to help you. I think one of the exciting things about CKEditor 5 is that you have a way of downcasting, like in your editor view, you can write something and it just is a nice clear UI that looks like Google Docs or anything else. But then the output can be completely different. So the demo I showed of the Drupal media element, when you see it in CKEditor, it's showing a preview. But when you save it, it's actually just saving a single element called Drupal media with the data attributes like the UUID and a few other things. And so what gets saved in the database is just that single element. And so I think that there's an opportunity to have editable screens where you can type in the description, the text, you can add images, you can change features, you can add attributes. And then when you save it, it saves as some kind of web component or some kind of little app, maybe just like a div with an ID on it or something like that you could load a React app into. And so there's a lot of, I think, opportunities for building something around web components or building something that the editor experience is very clean and straightforward, but what gets saved is something that's very dynamic. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, I don't think the person is around anymore, but they will be able to view the recording though.
Let's see that. All right. But yeah, I think that the markup around, I mean, the output that you can save from CKEditor is really exciting because we have a lot of control over what gets saved in the database and what gets presented to the editor. All right, well, I don't know if there's any other questions or if we should wrap this up. We can always continue the discussion in Slack too.
Just a question, Gabor, will you post the recording on Slack or somewhere?
Yeah, I will post it on Slack. Yeah, I will ping you with a link when it's ready.
Cool, thanks. I want to show the demo to my colleagues. They'll be really, really excited.
So I think
Yeah, I hope so. And if they have any feedback too on how they think it should work, or if you and your colleagues agree or disagree with any of the directions we've taken, I'd be really happy to hear it.
I think Peter created a demo with installing the Umami profile on Drupal 9 and adding the CKEditor 5 country project, and that was it, other than your custom module for the info box, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and all of the projects are linked in the README or in the issues for the source code. So if you want to look at any of the plugins I've written and give me any feedback on those, or find anything that need to be improved there, those are all on my GitHub, and I can send you links, or you can find them in the module. The info box is also I don't think I pushed it up yet, but it's going to be on GitHub as well.
All right, great. Well, thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for a great demo.
Yeah, thanks for the demo.
It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice
Thanks.
day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.